Hi everybody, welcome to the show. Hello everyone, welcome back to Raising AZ, this channel all about homeschooling. My name is Amanda, I am a certified teacher turned homeschooler, and today I'm going to talk about picking curriculum. How do you pick curriculum? How do you even know what to look for when you're looking at curriculum? Because there's literally thousands of options out there. How do you even know what to look for? Before I do that, why don't you take a second and subscribe and click the bell so that you get notifications about more amazing videos like this one. Let's jump in. It is spring. Spring is in the air. Spring is around the corner. This is the time of year when long-term homeschoolers start to plan and dream and think about what next year's program in homeschool, what they're going to do. Because right now I've got this whole year finished out. We've got our curriculum. We're going to be wrapping our things up, our books and stuff. I got this year kind of done. We're almost done our year. But it's time to start to think and plan about what I want to do for next year. And what that means is I'm going to start looking at what curriculum we're going to use next year. If you are new to homeschooling, this is super overwhelming. If you are not new to homeschooling, this is still super overwhelming. There are, like I said, thousands of options for every subject, everything from really cheap options that are free all the way up to programs that might cost you a couple $100. You might even, depending on where you are, it's just there's so many things you want to think about when it comes to picking curriculum that it just seems overwhelming. You don't even know where to start. So today I'm going to talk about how to decide what you're looking for in curriculum. So hopefully you can kind of narrow down some options for you. At least when you look at something, you're like, okay, that's not going to work for me. You can move on. It might help you make it a little bit easier to make a decision on curriculum. Before we get into that, what is curriculum? There is a huge discussion about what curriculum is. If you have teachers and government workers, they have one definition of what curriculum is. There's homeschoolers who have a different definition of what curriculum is. Technically, neither one is wrong, but they're also very different. They use the term very differently. I have a whole video on that. I'll put the link up here explaining how government and homeschoolers use the word differently, and also how to read government curriculum if that's something important to you. But let's talk about this on a kind of a really simplified, very easy way. So curriculum basically just means an outlining of what will be taught from the beginning of a term to the end of a term. That's the basic definition of curriculum. Like I said, the government uses it to kind of outline what will be taught, different concepts they expect to be taught by the end of a school year, how and what program and what textbook and what activities that are being taught is left up to the teachers. Homeschoolers use it as a term to describe a workbook or a program that once they've finished it will have taught everything they want their kid to learn for that grade by the end of the book. So same idea, just different ways of going about it. Okay, for the purpose of this video, to clarify, we're talking about it from the homeschooling perspective. So we're talking about looking at a program or a workbook or something like that, that once your kids have finished the program, they will have learned what is required of them to learn within that grade in that subject. Before we even get to how to pick curriculum, I think we need to decide, do we need curriculum? If you are an unschooler or a radical unschooler, you're going to say probably not, or your definition of curriculum is going to be very different. Some parents are going to say no, if you're not learning from curriculum, if you don't have a workbook for that, you're not really learning. There's a very wide spectrum of what parents think is acceptable when it comes to curriculum and what they want. So it is a question, do you want curriculum? Do you need curriculum? And the other question is, do you need curriculum for every subject? That's the one that we always ask. So for us, we don't buy a ton of curriculum. We basically buy a little bit of language, so some kind of phonics spelling or phonics grammar or spelling grammar, something kind of languagey like that. And then we also buy a math curriculum. That's pretty much the only set written workbook curriculum that we purchase that it would be a complete set. After that, we do a lot of unit studies. And so you can buy unit studies, specific units on different topics. You can also find a lot of free, or you can build them, which is what we do. I'll put a video on how to do that up here. So I basically build all of my social studies and science and a lot of our language arts. I build those programs from scratch. It's not really hard, but it's also very inexpensive compared to buying them. So I think that's a question you need to ask yourself is what subjects do I actually need a curriculum for? And what subjects can I kind of wing it? And how much curriculum are you looking for? What are you wanting out of your curriculum? I think that's always an important thing to think about before you jump into like, we need curriculum, right? What do we actually need curriculum for? The first kind of things we need to discuss and talk about are, what are you looking for out of a curriculum? So you're gonna have some curriculums that are going to be very like open and go. Basically, you open the book, the kid does the work, you're done kind of thing. You're gonna have other curriculums where it requires more parent involvement and more parent learning. There's nothing wrong with either one. Some people like a lot of prep and being able to kind of build it and make it their own. Other parents just want someone that they can just open, basically read the script, and their kids just do the work. It's also like, what do you need help with? Like if you're not really strong in math, you might want a program that has more math supports. If you're not great at spelling, you might want a spelling program that has more support, right? So you have to look at like what you need as a parent to help educate your kids as well, right? There's some debate about what curriculum would be. I know this because I've gotten into a discussion with someone on Facebook who argues that certain workbooks don't count as curriculum because there's no teacher's guide. I argue that that is not true. And the reason being is a curriculum, like I said, is defined as programs that by the end of it, you will have learned the skills. Nowhere does it state how those skills are learned, how it is going to be taught, and how a parent must teach that. So if you have a program that is a little bit more like, there's not a lot of parent instructions from the parent, it doesn't mean that it's not curriculum. It just means that it's not a heavily supported curriculum, right? It means that, the parents have to kind of have some basic understanding of what they're teaching. They have to be able to adjust and supplement when they need to or learn themselves. That's just how it is. But it doesn't mean that the curriculum is not curriculum. Curriculum is anything that you're going to use to support your kid learning something. You need to know your approach when you're looking at curriculum. I think it's really helpful because if you know what kind of approach you have, it can really help narrow down some of your curriculum choices. If you are a classical homeschooler where you have very specific views on what children need to learn, what kind of texts they need to read, how they're going to learn, you're going to pick very different curriculum than a Charlotte Mason homeschooler who has a much more nature-based program, a much gentler program, especially in the earlier years, whereas there's a lot more foundation work being laid in the early years in a classical program. What you're looking for are going to be two very different things. A Charlotte Mason homeschooler, you're not going to be buying classical curriculum. And so right there, you can start eliminating curriculums based on your approach. Secular versus religious is another thing you need to start thinking about when you're looking at your curriculum. Back in the 80s, a while ago, really the majority of people who were homeschooling for religious reasons. They're homeschooling to have a more faith-based education. And so when homeschool companies were creating product and programs, they are heavily faith-based. They're very Christian influenced. They're very Christian. They're written by Christians for Christians. That's kind of a big part of what kind of programming they are. Okay. So a lot of the older programs, like by older, I mean like they've been around for a long time. They are going to be quite often religiously based. So because that was kind of the main feature of homeschoolers for a very, very long time, we're talking like 40 years now, you're going to find there's a lot more Christian content out there than secular content. Secular content has definitely ramped up production over the last couple of years. I will tell you there's a lot more than there was even 3 years ago when we started, but it's just there, you do have less options. Okay. It's just the way it is. Their secular homeschooling has not really started to rise until, the last 10 to 15 years. It's just not been a real thing. So now that it's growing in popularity and there's more and more people, the base of products being created is much bigger, but it's still significantly smaller than religious programming. So when you're looking at that, if you are okay with secular, you're cutting out probably 75% of your curriculum options. If you want religious, you have a lot more options out there. I will say there's also a very large window in the religious programs of what of how Christian they are. That makes sense. Some programs, for example, we use a Christian-based math program by Master Books, Math for Living Education. And while it is Christian-based, I would say on a scale of like 0 to 10, it's maybe only like a 2 or a 3. Like there's not a ton of Christian stories or ideas or messages. So there's definitely, even within Christian curriculum, there's definitely like a span. So if you're not looking for like super religious, so there's definitely like a span. Some are much more like, oh, like for example, ours, I think the first book that we did with Alexi from that program, they talked about Noah's Ark and God maybe twice in the whole book. Whereas I know some other programs like Abeka, it's much more prevalent. It's in every other page or every page. So depending on your comfort levels with faith and religion, sometimes a slightly less Christian book might be a great option for you as well, depending on your comfort levels. But like I said, it's just good to know that, you know, there's secular and then there's Christian, and then within the Christian there's also like a span of how in depth it goes. Okay, so just things you need to know. Another thing you might want to think about when you're looking at homeschool programs, especially if you're looking at math programs, is mastery versus spiral. So a mastery-based program is a program where they will learn about one skill, they will practice one skill, and they'll get really good at that one skill before building onto it. And then they will practice that skill, they get really good at that skill, and then they'll build onto it. They practice it, get really good at it, and then you're kind of done that section. Then you'll move on to another topic or strand. Practice the same kind of thing. So they'll do like addition, for example, single digit addition. Then you're going to do double digit addition, no carrying. Then you're going to do double digit additioning with carrying. That's your kind of your chapters for the grade, for example, in that strand. Then you would move on to like measurement. And then you do a couple different things in measurement. Then geometry, a couple different things in geometry. That's how a mastery-based program works. So you're learning a skill, mastering it, and then moving on and building. One of the great things is kids do tend to get the mastery down. They understand the concepts. One of the bad things is they tend to be very boring because you're doing the same thing for so long. It's also compartmentalized. So you're doing addition, then you're doing geometry, then you're doing measurement, and then the next year you start all over at addition, and oftentimes you see kids who have kind of forgotten how to do it. They need a refresher. So you have a little bit of learning loss in that sense. Okay. Spiral-based programs work differently. So they work on kind of a scaffolding approach. So kids learn a little bit about one topic, then they move on to another topic, then they learn a little bit about another topic, then they learn about another topic, then they come back to the first topic, learn, refresh themselves, and then build on it and move up a level. And then they kind of go around the circle, refresh, and move up. And so they're always rotating through topics. They're always learning something new. So you're often, you know, doing different things every week or other week or every couple weeks. So it kind of keeps things A, fresh in their minds, and B, things are changing more often. So it's not like we're sitting here doing the same thing for 3 or 4 months. It's every week or 2 weeks we're changing onto a different topic. I personally am a fan of spiral programs. I've seen the benefits of them both in the classroom and like just with my own kids. They like when they can like, oh, I remember doing that a couple weeks ago. Like they just like that. But if you're a classical homeschooler or maybe it just doesn't work for your kids, then you're gonna pick mastery, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with either one of them. It's just the way they are. You can spiral a mastery program. So if there's a program out there that you like, it's just a little boring, you can spiral it. I have a whole video on that, and you can actually find that up here. So if you're looking for that and you find a great program you like, but you just want to change it up more frequently, that's definitely the video for you. Another thing you need to consider when you are looking at programs is definitely whether you want a digital or a physical. So physical, I'm talking about like a workbook or something that you print off versus like a screen time kind of activity. So an app, a computer program, a video program, something like that. So they come at very different price points. I find it's hard to judge price-wise between a physical and a digital offering because some of them are like a one-time thing. Some of them are like a subscription base. You have to pay every month. But there's definitely, personally, I think that digitals tend to be on the cheaper side because you don't have the printing costs. But then you're getting into like screen time issues. So some parents really want to minimize screen time, and if you're picking a lot of digitals, your kid might be in front of the computer quite a lot. So personally, I think I would recommend that you don't do too much screen time and you find some kind of balance. But really, it's up to you. Like whatever works for you is what you're gonna do, right? The thing you want to make sure that if you're getting digital products and digital like programs, that computer programs, web-based programs, you got to make sure that you have a really reliable internet, because nothing is going to throw you off more than when you go to log into things and your internet is down and you just can't handle the bandwidth of something. So that's a thing to think about when you're looking at digitals. While they might be cheaper or they might be a little more fun, if you don't have the bandwidth to handle a program, or you have a limited amount of internet access depending on where you live, like more rural areas have less internet options, that is something to consider when you're looking at digitals. When you got a physical project, it's sitting, the workbook is sitting in front of you, you do it, it's not reliant on anything else. So again, things just to think about. And then the last thing I think we need to talk about is definitely the budget. The price. Things, obviously, if you're buying curriculum, you are paying for it, right? There's money. There's everything on the scale from totally free to, oh my gosh, that costs an arm and a leg. I know some people who are spending, I think our curriculum cost for the year maybe $150 for 2 kids. Not too bad. That's 2 math programs and 2 language programs. Not horrible at all. Whereas I know some friends who are spending, you know, $150 per kid per math program. It's all depending on what you want to spend, how much you're comfortable spending. There's literally an option for everyone, okay? There's literally an option for any budget. When it comes to homeschooling and buying your curriculum, I think you need to set like how much are you comfortable spending on all of your curriculum for each child. And then from there, allocating kind of a certain percentage of your budget to different subjects. And I usually allocate by subject that I'm the least comfortable with, if that makes sense. So I'm good at math, but I'm not fantastic at it. And so a program that I will put more money into a math program versus something like a language where I feel very, very confident. I hardly put any budget into science or social studies because I'm like super confident in that. So that's a great way to kind of budget, because the more a book is like open and go, the more expensive it's going to be. The more a program has a lot of manipulatives and extras, the more expensive it's going to be. Parent guides, more expensive it's going to be. So the more you as a parent need support with it, the more expensive you're going to be looking. So that's kind of how we allocate our budgets, is by parental comfort levels, and then looking for programs that fit within that. The other thing to think about when you're looking at your costs is some subjects have a lot more free or less expensive options than others. So like I said, social studies, novel studies, science, you can get tons and tons of either really inexpensive or totally free unit studies out there. You can even build your own unit study. Like it's not hard and it's totally free. Those are things that you can easily do. Whereas building a math program, a lot more work, a lot harder, especially if you're trying to keep your kids close to grade level. Getting a curriculum might just make more sense, investing some money into that. Whereas the other subjects, you can kind of pick and choose a little bit easier about what you want to do. Another thing to note when we're talking about the cost of curriculums, all-in-one programs are always far more expensive than single subject programs. So an all-in-one program would be a program where it has every subject covered or many subjects covered, and they do all the work for you. I personally don't recommend all-in-one programs, because from what I've seen and from what I've heard from other people is the all-in-ones tend to be overwhelming. They tend to take a long time, and they're a lot of money for not a lot of stuff. I see a lot of people who move away from all-in-one programs, and so it's not my first recommendation. If that's something you want to do, that's definitely like your prerogative, but I've never personally seen a parent who has found an all-in-one curriculum that they love and use for many, many years. I find most parents who buy an all-in-one curriculum end up switching to something a little bit different or supplementing subjects here and there. So for that simple reason, I often just recommending buying the curriculum that you need for specific subjects. Lots of options out there. It's very easy to get a couple different workbooks or different curriculums and kind of build your year that way without having to buy the all-in-one, which tend to be very, very expensive compared to buying a couple subjects individually. And then also the programs that have a lot of extras, a lot of manipulatives, they're going to be much more pricey. I know, for example, like UC Math has great program, very expensive hands-on package. So if that's something you want to invest in, definitely go ahead for it. We tend to use things that we find around the house as our manipulatives, and so we save some money that way. So just things to consider when you're looking at the cost of curriculum. Hopefully this helps you kind of figure out what you're looking for in curriculum, whether it's religious versus secular, mastery versus spiral, physical versus digital. Do you even need curriculum for that subject? I hope this helps you kind of like narrow down what you're looking for, so when you're browsing you can like quickly eliminate options based on like that does not fit what I want, versus like being totally overwhelmed by the literally thousands of options out there. I hope this is helpful. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, again, subscribe, and you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, where we're doing all kinds of fun homeschooling stuff, and you can see what kind of curriculums we use and why. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week.